Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new NVIDIA daily update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over NVIDIA stock. Let's go over what is happening to the stock and what we can expect moving forward on a kind of surprising, painful day, in my opinion, right? It was actually up a decent amount, like 1.5% or something like that pre-market. And it was looking pretty good. It was looking actually pretty solid, but ended up being a massive bull trap into a pretty decent sell-off throughout the day. So let's go over it. Let's talk about it. And yeah, if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice, and I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you do enjoy my technical analysis, etc., I do share my thoughts every day. The market is open in my membership section down below for just $3 a month. Again, making it very cheap, just again, mainly to eliminate trolls essentially and whatnot. Yeah, the link is below in the description. Again, mainly share my thoughts on Tesla and sometimes other stocks, or for $5 a month, same access to all that rather. Plus NVIDIA daily updates. But jumping into it, NVIDIA closing the day down, unfortunately, 2.25%, closing just above $134 per share, which obviously compared to the market is going to be a little bit of an underperformance. Now, semis in general, like chips rather in general, are just, getting a little bit of a smackdown today, right? AMD being AMD, pretty much down every single time. But I actually think I honestly think this could be at least a short-term bottom, at the very least up until the mid 130s. So let's talk about it, right? What does this actually mean? So NVIDIA, it had a nice gap up, right? It had that nice little gap up. Let's go ahead and remove market bias for an actual keep it. Nice little gap up, right? It had a nice little gap up in the morning and it was looking pretty solid. I meant to use the drawing tool there. I'm gonna go ahead and change that here. It was actually looking pretty solid, but unfortunately the market bias 1 hour rejection is just still too powerful for NVIDIA, right? Unfortunately, just it's not enough to break above it just yet. And we also were setting up this little pennant that I was mentioning, right? Remember this little pennant right here? Well, we clearly played out this pennant, right? We clearly broke down below it. And yeah, that's obviously not a good sign. And arguably played it out so far. Maybe a little bit more pain ahead. Maybe we go a tiny bit lower. But I don't think there's too much more pain ahead, at least for now, because I believe still, like I mentioned before, the very low 130s in theory should be still a very, very massive area of support. Now, whether or not it'll actually act as a very massive area of support is obviously another question. But as far as we're aware, there's no reason to believe that it won't until proven otherwise, right? Because it has been in the past many, many times. And yeah, I just, it is the rising trend slash channel type support line right here. You can see this area should be pretty important, right? This was obviously a massive area of resistance here, and acted as support here, pretty much acted as support here, acted as support here, and so far showing some buying pressure coming in here regardless, despite this obviously red day today. So, this is still, an overall pretty powerful area for bulls to really, really step in and finally bring some life back into the stock that has been, at least for the last, month or so, slightly underperforming really the market, right? It's definitely not been participating in this overall rally the mega caps are having, right? It's been definitely just kind of very mute for a while now, despite bullish flow constantly flowing in on NVIDIA, right? We always see bullish flow on NVIDIA, pretty much always flowing in 3.1 million, 2.1 million, 3.2 million coming in for February 2025. A lot of calls coming in, which is interestingly enough is the same strike that a lot of calls came in February 21st for AMD for the first time in a while, right? Almost 10 million calls of AMD came in as well. So pretty interesting coincidence, if you will, there. So let's see what happens between these two moving forward. But I do think that these guys, especially NVIDIA, I feel like they're getting ready to participate in this rally soon. Now, this obviously hinges on the fact that about 130-ish holds and we do not close, and really break down below that, obviously. But assuming that doesn't happen, this isn't the spot to get scared, in my opinion. This is not the spot where you start getting worried. This is, in fact, the spot that you should be excited because this is, in theory, providing a phenomenal risk versus reward opportunity. In my opinion, not financial advice. So that's kind of, the general consensus on NVIDIA right now. Obviously, the market bias on the daily is still also providing some resistance, right? The 1 hour and the daily, both providing some issues here, right? We need to break back above this. We actually were breaking down below this little situation we find ourselves in right here, you can see, but we arguably closed pretty much at the line. Again, the lines aren't drawn to perfection, right? They're just taken with a grain of salt. But ultimately, the thing you want to see for NVIDIA is you need to see 140, 141 broken. If NVIDIA at any point in time, especially next week, can get back above 140, 141, something like that, the very low 140s, and turn that back into support, that'll not only start slowly bringing the market buys back into support, we'll break out of this little downtrend that we've been experiencing pretty much since all-time highs on NVIDIA as well. And I think it'll get ready to rocket because, one perspective you can have is you can kind of argue is the fact that it is almost like a little bit of a, little bull flaggy action that's happening here as well. So again, this all hinges, in my opinion, on 130 holding. And if we hold 130 and then break 140, 141, I think NVIDIA will begin participating in this kind of Santa rally that market is kind of participating in without NVIDIA, not really invited to the party. Now, let's go over to the 4-hour chart really quickly, right? This is where things also get interesting. Now, obviously, we're below market bias here as well. So, things are not perfect. However, we were below market bias here as well. And, it was, we were below it here despite us, market bias still being green. But I want to bring out the bands one more time, right? This is the bands. This is what we call the bottom over here, right? We pretty much call the bottom almost to perfection right here. Is that happening again, though? That's the question, right? Is this going to happen again? So let's take a look and let's compare, what is happening to the stock. So each time the stock has come into these level 2, if you will, oversold bands kind of, section, if you will, it has bounced pretty much every single time, even arguably slightly here, a nice little small bounce, but not as major, right? Here it actually came down to that level. And again, I want to point your attention, oops, almost fell and tripped over my chair. I want to point your attention to what happened when it was at these levels in the bands, this oversold territory and the RSI. Take a look here, oversold, RSI, oversold, bounce. Here, oversold, RSI, oversold, bounce. Here, not that long ago, remember I called this one, oversold, RSI, oversold, level 2 bands, right? Bam, bounce. And now we're pretty much at the exact same setup that all 3 of these, which led to bounces, were in. Now, obviously, this time could be different. Nothing is guaranteed. Doesn't mean it has to bounce. This could finally be the time that maybe just falls apart. It is what it is, right? That is a possibility. That is always a possibility. However, just strictly looking off of the pattern, the history, and the way the stock really behaves with these, bands, especially this close to major support, 130 and the trend line support, same thing. We're at the second level of overbands, oversold conditions, just like we were back here. RSI not only is oversold, like it was here just before, we had this tiny bounce right here like a couple of days ago, but it's also showing a bit of a bullish divergence where the RSI is making obvious higher lows while the stock is making lower lows. That is a nice looking bullish divergence as well. So it feels like, if there's a moment for the NVIDIA to finally start gearing up and, for it to really finally start shining, maybe we get a bit more pain. Maybe we come down a little bit lower. Maybe we, go to 132, 131. That is a possibility. But if there's a spot for NVIDIA to finally regroup, if you will, and finally find that momentum to finally participate in the Santa Claus rally that the market is experiencing, this area right here, this is it. Like this is, in my opinion, honestly, it's kind of do or die for NVIDIA. Either it finds a phenomenal bounce from here and it makes its way well higher, which again, to me, confirmation would be above about $140 per share. Or, it falls apart. That's really the other option, right? It just simply falls apart and it just doesn't play out the way, obviously the bulls are hoping for, right? So let's see how it plays out. But again, this is, in my opinion, not the time to get worried unless we start losing 130. Then, okay, maybe it's not as great anymore. But again, just my 2 cents. The exact same scenario. You can go back to this video right here. What is this? November 27th. I said the exact same thing here. We were below the 50 EMA, which we are below now. Things aren't looking super hot on the daily chart in terms of, if I go back here, let's take a quick look again one more time. The bands, for instance, right? Bam, right. 50 EMA, we're below that. We also had this double inside day, which was looking very good in the morning. We actually broke above it, and we actually were turning this area into a support briefly for like the first hour or so of the day until obviously things really hit the fan and this, NVIDIA and everything just really starts to sell off. But the point is that it was looking phenomenal until obviously it wasn't, right? A massive bull trap into a massive sell-off. Could be a shakeout candle. We'll see, of course. No one knows for sure. So the daily could look better. I will admit the daily definitely could look better, but the 4-hour is also just, again, like I said, in the same conditions that it was all these times before that saw pretty decent bounces, like 10% bounces not long after. It looks the exact same. The setup is pretty much identical. So let's see. Calls are still coming in. The bulls are stepping in on AMD. The bulls are stepping in on NVIDIA. Maybe it's finally time for these two to awaken from their slumber because they have been, NVIDIA has been asleep and AMD has been getting mauled by bears, it feels like, in its slumber. That thing has been not having a good time so far. Very, very poor performance from AMD. But I'll just, kind of give you guys a little bonus here, if you will. If there's a place for AMD, in my opinion, to potentially, again, nothing's guaranteed, just, potentially to find a bounce, at least to back up to mid 130s, at least. This is a pretty good spot. You can see massive area of previous all-time highs way, of course, a long time ago. Actually, no, this was an all-time high, sorry. But nonetheless, nice little pivot point back here where, it did have a nice massive rejection and then finally small rejection here, but when it broke through it, massive continuation rally. We're kind of in that similar situation where, well, not in a similar situation, but more in the sense that we're taking this area, you know, and hopefully, like we did here, turning it into a support on the weekly time frame. That's kind of what I'm looking for AMD moving forward. And let's see if it can do that. And let's see if these chips can finally find some life and make their way up. Because AMD on the 4-hour, same idea actually as NVIDIA. It's very similar setup. Also very oversold on the 4-hour on the bands, even more than NVIDIA is. RSI is oversold, and it's also making a bullish divergence on the 4-hour. So they have a pretty similar setup. So let's see if they can both awaken next week. That would be the ideal scenario. But again, you're here for AMD. Honestly, the main things you want to look for, if there was 2 levels you want to pay attention to moving forward, 130 pretty much needs to hold, 141, 140 pretty much needs to break for the bulls, and for the bears, the exact opposite. Anyways, that's all I got for you. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you on Monday. Peace.